Number 2.
Firstly, it is essential that I give you a little backstory, as the story to come won't make any sense without it. My name is Alyssa, and I live in the northern suburbs of Adelaide, a city in South Australia. I think it's also worth mentioning that I'm totally blind, and as a result, I travel around with a seeing eye dog named Lizzy. And just for those who may actually question how I'm typing this, I'm using the voiceover and dictation features on my iPhone. Where I live, it's pretty quiet, and you don't see many people or cars out during the day. Overall, I would say it's a pretty nice area, and the crime rate is very low. Now, to the actual story. This happened 2 days ago, and it was a pretty terrifying and traumatic experience. So, I was walking to the local shops with my seeing eye dog, and at the time, I was walking opposite to the local school. My 13-year-old cousin, we'll call him Thomas, he'd seen me and was talking to me from across the street. I couldn't hear him clearly as he was on the school oval and there were a whole bunch of kids out there. So when I heard him say run, I thought it was just another kid talking. But he came closer to the edge of the school property and said,
"I'm serious, Lisa. Fucking run. There's 2 dudes gaining on you."
It was at this point that I started to pick up the pace a lot. I started running as fast as I could, and I was thinking about what I would do if the guys actually attacked me. I had so many questions going around in my head, like, would Lacey save me? Would she attack them? Would I have to defend myself? I did a lot of self-defense training because my best friend is a national judo champion, and my father is a black belt in karate. I was actually a cross-country runner, and am now a tandem cyclist. So I'm pretty athletic and can run long distances before becoming tired. But getting back to the story, I've always been told that before taking any action, you should always try to run away or attract some attention first. In the end, I decided quickly I would let Lacey off of the lead and she could run off and she knew exactly where she was. She and I knew the area very well, so I knew that she would only go 3 places. She would either go back home, to the school, or to the local shops, and people would think that it was weird that a seeing eye dog was wandering out alone with her harness on. Anyway, she ran off in the direction of the school, and I knew that my cousin would see her, and he would make sure that help would come quickly. It was at this point that one of the guys approached me and said,
"Whoa, you're very pretty. I like your hair. I was just looking at it in the sunlight and how beautiful you are."
He starts to touch my hair, and this is where my self-defense training kicks in. I grabbed his hand and started twisting it to make him let go of my hair. But with the adrenaline running through my veins, I had totally forgotten about the second guy. He grabbed me and started pulling me towards the ground. I tried everything that I had learnt in judo to prevent this from happening, but he was just too big and strong. My objective was to use his weight against him, but that just didn't work. He pressed something cold, I'll assume it was a knife, against my throat and said,
"Shut up, you bitch. Don't scream, or you'll be in big trouble. We just want to play."
I'm a pretty small girl. I'm 155 centimeters, which roughly translates to 5 feet and 2 inches. I don't have a big build, and it was at this point I was pretty much ready to give up, because 2 guys against 1 small girl meant that the odds were not in my favor. I won't go into all of the gory details, but essentially they went on about how they were going to have sex with me, whether I liked it or not. Fortunately, at that time, 4 cops, my cousin, and my dog showed up. My dog was ready to tear strips out of them, which is unusual because she's a Labrador and they're usually pretty calm and friendly. The 2 men were arrested, and my cousin was let off school to calm me and to make sure I got home safely. The thing that still makes my blood run cold is what they meant when they said they wanted to play. Who knows what would have happened if my cousin wasn't there and he didn't see them? Who knows what would have happened if the cops didn't show up as soon as they did? It's something that I can't think about, and I've had nightmares ever since.
Number 1.
Apologies for the length of this. This story took place over the last 30 odd years, so please bear with me. This story may seem hard to believe, in fact almost impossible, and probably a lot different from what you're used to. And though it may be difficult to believe, I assure you, every word is true. I'm submitting this under a proxy to protect my identity, as even to this day I am in danger if I reveal this information. but people need to know. In 1983, I was serving in the British Royal Air Force. I had been working for 15 years and had, if I say so myself, an outstanding record. I can't say a lot about where I was or what I was doing, but suffice to say, I was based in England. One day, I got a call from my friend. He seemed a bit odd and said there were some people waiting to see me. When I arrived there were 3 men sitting at a desk. They searched me, which I found odd, and showed me an ID card. It had the NATO symbol on it. They informed me that they wanted to offer me a job opportunity to join a secret task force. My operations would be classified and my hours reduced to 0, but for 9 months of the year, day or night, I could be called into action. I was interested and told them so. I expected to fill out forms or something, but the men simply stood up and said, "Come with us." We got into a jet black helicopter and flew for about an hour. When we arrived, the area was pitch black and looked deserted. It was like they'd flown me into the middle of a farm. We walked onto a concrete platform, and the man who'd done all the talking got out a radio and said something, and the platform started to descend. When it stopped, there was a long corridor with a metal door at the end. I was asked to turn away whilst they unlocked it. I wasn't sure how, as there was no lock or code or anything, just a solid metal door. When we got in, it actually reminded me of a NASA mission control. There were screens everywhere and about 100 people all dressed in suits working at desks. I was taken to an interview room and told more about the job. The man looked at me when we sat down and said,
"I'm going to tell you a little bit about what you're going to be doing. You may ask questions, but I may not be able to answer them all. Do you understand?"
"Yes," I said, getting agitated. The place felt wrong. I had no idea where in the UK I was, and the man who was talking had an American accent.
"Your job, if you choose to work for us, will be to secure locations with little notice awaiting our NATO clear-up team to arrive."
"What exactly will we be securing?" I asked, thinking rogue terrorist group camps.
"All I can say is experimental technology that we can't have falling into enemy hands."
"Which enemy?" I asked, thinking a perfectly simple question. He didn't answer, just shared a look with the other man in the room before continuing.
"You will find the pay generous and working hours considerate, but when called, you must attend immediately. We only currently can give around 45 minutes warning. In that time, you must attend your team and fly to the location." I nodded, interested. I always loved a challenge. "It's needless to say, secrecy is paramount for this operation. Your silence will be rewarded. Any breach in this trust would be most severely punished. You will see as you get to work with the sensitive nature of the work. And I can't stress enough how vital it is for your own safety that you keep a cool head and that you keep quiet." Out of curiosity, I asked,
"What is the punishment for breaking the vow of secrecy?" expecting prison.
"I can't tell you specifics, but you would not be seen again."
The rest of the interview was all about my level of training and abilities, and at the end, I agreed. I was given the keys to a really nice apartment in the city, and given a nice new car, and for the first 2 months was paid a lot of money to sit watching sport. One night, however, at about 2:30 a.m, I was awoken by an alarm. It was a call to arms. So I quickly got on my uniform, and I was out of the house within 5 minutes. I made my way to the base of operations. I want to say where it is, but more than one person has vanished investigating it, so for now, I'll just say it's very close to Wales. When I arrived, I met my fellows, a brilliant bunch of lads. I was shocked to see one of them with a horrible injury to his jaw. It was burned, and a chunk of flesh had been removed. You could see the way that the doctors had patched him up, but other than that, he was a fantastic man. They were all telling me to prepare myself. We were radioed through a location and set off using the same black helicopter as before. The location, it was a forest, Sherwood Forest. We arrived within 45 minutes, but were unable to land the helicopter in the trees. I wanted to know what we were looking for, but the others just kept saying, "You'll know when you see it." When we were over the forest, I could see a tree on fire and other little fires around the area. We landed outside and secured the area. We had strict instructions not to touch anything there. I'd been told it was experimental stuff, and what laid before me on the ground, it's burned into my mind, and it's the reason I tell this story. A man and a woman were laying on the floor, both with a calm expression on their faces. Both were dead, and in a horrible way. The man had his genitals removed in a very precise way. The cuts were smooth. There was a slice down his left side, and his chest cavity looked hollow. I thought at the time he was starved and killed. Later on, I would realize that his organs were actually removed and never found. His entire body was hairless. No hair, no eyebrows, eyelashes, arm hair, or anything. Not a single one. And it was the same for the female. But her injuries were much worse. She too had her genitals removed, including breasts, but also her tongue, one eye, organs, and, as I would see later, about 12 inches of the anal cavity removed somehow. Now, I was used to pointing guns and flying helicopters, so I'm not ashamed to say I threw up all over the place. And this more than anything is what made my fellow teammate my friend. They took me to one side and said,
"We get this all the time, and we don't like it. When you find out what happens, you won't either."
"Who are they? Who did this to them?" I asked, trying not to puke again.
"A couple went missing about a month ago. We were expecting them to show up, and as to who did this, that's hard to believe until you've seen it. For now, just consider them the enemy."
About 20 minutes later, a team arrived, and we were told to leave. I asked on the way back to the base what had happened to them, and one of my friends just said,
"Experiments."
And that was it. I didn't want to know more, and I spent the next 3 weeks sitting in my home, wondering what the hell I'd signed up for. I finally contacted one of my new friends and asked to talk. He explained they got about one of these cases every 3 months, and not to worry because we were doing everything we could to stop it. I asked him again who the enemy is, and he flat out told me,
"We don't know. We don't know who they are, what they want, or where they come from. All we know is that they aren't from Earth, and they have technology far better than ours."
I told him to piss off, but at the same time, it made sense in my mind. I didn't want to admit that little green men were doing this, but after what I had seen, it actually seemed logical. Finally, I asked, "The boy and the girl, what will they tell their families?"
"Nothing,"
he said. "Nothing?"
"They'll remain on the missing persons list forever."
There was a question I wanted to ask. How many people have died that you know of? But I was too scared of the answer. That was it for me. I knew people had to know about this, because out there, somewhere, were families searching for hope for their missing loved ones, who would never be told what had happened to them and would never be able to grieve. I asked him if he thought it was right, and he said no. Him and the other guys had been collecting evidence for the last 6 months, hoping to think of a way to make it public. They usually took little cameras with them to take crime scene photos before the cleanup team arrived, but had stopped last time, not knowing if they could trust me. I told him I was going to help them and began racking my brain for ways to do it. From what I had been told, someone had actually tried to tell the public about this before, but failed, and died a year later due to bad health. About a month later, the alarm, it went off again, and although I didn't want to, I attended the call. This time though, we saw a wreckage. It was in a field, somewhere near Lincolnshire, bits of metal everywhere. A single male body was on the floor, literally in pieces. But it was arranged in a human shape. Whoever had done it didn't seem to realize the difference between the left and the right arms. The mouth of the head of this man was continually opening, remaining open and snapping shut. I'd never seen anything like it. Later on, I would find out some kind of electrical implant was in the man's brain, shocking him and causing those involuntary movements after death. But shit, it was a damn scary thing to see. I began taking pictures with a crappy little Kodak. One of my friends who was with me touched a piece of metal that day and got a horrible burn. We were all given these tablets to take at the time and told to take them once a day for 2 weeks, but not to tell anyone we were on them. They made my stomach churn. It was like a 2-week self-induced illness. After getting the photos developed, I started wondering about ways to get them out there. I couldn't just call up a newspaper and be like, "Hey, I've got those pictures of mangled corpses I would like you to put in your paper." One day though, the answer came to me. Whilst out on a walk in the countryside with my dog, I came across a laminated sign saying something like, "Seen strange lights in the sky? Hello, I'm an independent journalist looking for stories about UFO or alien encounters. I'm very interested in any sightings, and all information will be handled with the strictest of confidence. If you have anything to share, please call me." I thought, hell, it's a bit of a long shot, but maybe he will know how to get it out there. We'll call him Derek. And Derek, if you're listening to this, I'm truly sorry for what happened to you. I called and said I had some photos I needed to show him and couldn't talk over the phone. We met in a motorway lay-by. He pulled up his car with his wife and his kids in the back, and they got out to give us some privacy. I told him about my job, and at first he seemed interested. Then I asked if he was up to seeing the pictures. He said he was, but all the colour drained out of him when I showed them. He was a Welshman and kept saying, "Oh my gosh." Eventually, we agreed to meet up again, and at a different place this time, and he said he would do some digging to see what he could do. Little did I know, he thought I was some psychopathic killer, and after making copies at a local shop, he took the photos I gave him straight to the police. He later told me that the police officer took as much info about what I said as possible, as well as the pictures. He left that night as the officer was getting some other officers ready to come and arrest me. Derek checked in the station the next morning, hoping to see I had been arrested, and was told the officer he spoke to was now on holidays, and a new one was in charge of the investigation. This man wore no uniform and told Derek that the whole thing had been an elaborate prank. The images were faked, but were being kept as a safeguard. Derek then slipped that he had copies of them, and this didn't sit well with the officer, who demanded he handed over all the copies at once, as they could be used to upset people not in on the joke. Derek agreed, but never surrendered the photos. When we next met, Derek, he was a shell of himself. He told me he had started getting calls from someone claiming to work for a newspaper, asking him for his story, and when he refused, the man began threatening him to keep quiet or else. Then his wife began getting calls late at night threatening her. This climaxed when Derek's office and home was burnt to the ground in a suspected arson attack, taking with it all the copies of the pictures. Allegedly, a man had claimed to need to read their boiler meter, and it was believed he had planted a device to cause the fire. Derek's wife left him and took their child. This left Derek a poor man who just wanted a story about interesting lights in the sky, fearing for his life. I told him not to associate himself with me or the story any longer for his own safety, and I continued my work. But after this, we were joined on each call out by a senior officer, and we never got a chance to take more pictures. Out of fear, my friends and I destroyed most of the evidence, and as a side note, I have some photos left, but they're only going to be released when I eventually pass away, so as to protect my family. I had now seen the lengths people would go to just to keep this thing under wraps, and I didn't like it. From that moment on, I decided to just get on with the job, and over the next 10 years, I saw some pretty incredible things. Things you would hardly believe. I've seen alien bodies, and they're not like what you'd see on TV. We called them demons because they looked like they could rip you apart without a second thought. We had strict instructions to stay away from anything alive and to report it on the radio immediately. I hate to say it, but I started to get used to the drill. I didn't like seeing these dead people or crashes, but I was getting used to it. A lot of call-outs would turn out to be dead animals, mutilated in horrible ways. The most was 36 sheep corpses dumped. Most of them had bits of metal wired to their jaws. Others just had organs removed. There were bad times too. We once arrived at a scene to find a woman struggling to breathe. Her injuries were too severe. Even with the best doctors in the world, she couldn't have been saved. I'm not sure she could have been allowed to live if she did anyway. But one of the worst was an event on a country road in England where 9 human bodies were dumped, all in mutilated ways, just lined up on the road. That time I was sure I would see something in the news about it, but nothing appeared. In the 1990s, I won't say when exactly, but I retired. My health was beginning to really suffer from some of the things I'd been exposed to. One of the nastiest was a weird bright flash of light that rendered me and my team on the ground puking and ended up with us all in hospital with acute liver failure. We all recovered that time, but now there's just 2 of us left. Although we're now retired, we're still very well looked after. We have the best healthcare money can provide, and we need it. It can't be a coincidence that everyone on my team has battled cancer at least twice. I've had cancer 3 times now. I have benign tumours everywhere. I can't walk properly anymore either. I have a nice home and a loving family, and I never talk about what my job was, but even to this day, I know this story, it needs to be out there. There's a team in the UK who has some kind of advanced warning about UFO activity. Sometimes it looks like we shot them down. Other times it looks like they just came to drop things off. We were never once called to any false alarms. Everything was sure. I rack my brains trying to think about how we could have 45 minutes notice before a UFO will land or crash. I feel sorry for the people who go missing who have never been seen again. The team is NATO, but the strings are pulled by America. We know that there are other teams across the UK and Europe because we have had times where I've been called over to France or the Netherlands. We knew we could be called anywhere in Europe, but never in America. They had their own thing going on. In 2010, Derek started talking to an independent researcher who later managed to contact me. I have every confidence in his ability to get this story out there, and he has already made a 2-hour documentary on the subject. My privacy has always been respected by him. His documentaries are all on YouTube and can be found when searching for UFO NATO on YouTube, but I warn you, you do need a strong stomach for some of it. So, that was my job for most of my adult life. I was well paid to keep quiet, and I reap the rewards of that now. That being said, I do not and never have agreed with the job I was doing. But as a soldier, I knew mine was not to reason why, but to follow my orders. I had seen the cost for stepping out of line, and my life meant too much to waste failing to get this out there. I know that the media is all ultimately controlled by the same people who pulled my strings, and I know now that the only way to make this story common knowledge is not to get it into the newspaper or a website, but for ordinary people to tell the story, knowing it's true. If enough people do that and it becomes common knowledge, the floodgate will open, and this dark hidden secret, it will at last be revealed. G'day mates, it's Busta here. Well, I hope you enjoyed the video guys. Thanks again to the Hive members that bravely shared their stories for us all to hear. And for the chance to have your story feature in a video, you can send your story to my email, which is in the description below. And be sure to keep them coming guys, as this channel relies upon your stories to continue. Also guys, please do me a little favour and just state in your email what your story is about in the description, and also provide me with a short written statement of consent just so that I can be above board with everything. And also remember to tell me in the email if you would like to remain anonymous, and please also change any names if you don't want particular names to be shared. It would be awesome if you could like, share, comment and subscribe if you're new. Don't forget to follow me on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram for updates throughout the week. Thanks again for tuning in guys, and as always, I'll see you mates in the next one.